Found out wife got pregnant just a couple of months after our wedding. My wife and I met in early 2004. I was 27, she 25. She was gorgeous and had a youthful innocence about her. She turned heads everywhere we went. She also seemed genuinely kind and came from what appeared on the surface to be a great family. However, I had to learn the hard way that her beauty was only skin deep. We had a great relationship the first 6 months, but then red flags started to appear. I ignored them. Later in 2004. She got pregnant, mine confirmed years later, but began withholding closeness. She said it would get better and that it was just a phase because of the pregnancy. I believed her and proposed just before our daughter was born in May 2005. We married in 2006. Still not having resolved the love issues. She withheld closeness throughout the marriage. Even on the honeymoon. She continued to withhold it maybe once every 6 months through the first 3 years of our marriage. The stress for me was unbearable. She did decide to have love with me one time, however, finally initiating after a 6-month dry spell. She conveniently told me as I climaxed that she had forgotten to take her pill. Welcome our son in May 2009. Later that year, we were shocked when she was diagnosed with head and neck cancer after finding lumps on her neck. After lots of treatment and scans. However, the doctors told us in 2011 that they had misdiagnosed her cancer and that it was in fact cervical cancer caused by an STD HPV. Knowing how little we had closeness and that I hadn't been with anyone since before I met her. This was a red flag I couldn't ignore. I snooped on her phone and email and found a trove of emails and texts showing she had numerous affairs starting just months after we got together, leading up to and all the way through the wedding. Then throughout the marriage up until her diagnosis. There were texts that indicated she didn't even know whose child our daughter was. Then more messages indicated she had terminated another person's child just a couple of months after our wedding, one that she had told me and her family was a failure. Worst of all, however, was finding the texts between her and another guy arguing about how she thought he had given her the HPV that caused her cancer. The enormity of it all was suffocating. When I confronted her, she denied everything. She told me I was crazy and that maybe that's why she had denied me. I'm mild-mannered to a fault, which she hated about me. She enjoyed confrontation and often used emotional outbursts to bully me when I would ask why we weren't having closeness. She had always had a hard time with accountability. But this was just infuriating. I began to lay out the evidence, starting with the earliest affair, in a dismissive voice. She said, "Oh, you knew?" I did not. I then showed more evidence. She would dismiss it as if it hadn't happened. Even with the evidence right there in front of her. I'd ask her if that was the extent of it. She'd say yes. Then I'd reveal more evidence and call her on her lies. This continued to happen until I finally came to terms with the fact that she had no intention of admitting her guilt or apologizing for her actions. In October of 2011, I made the move out. During the time that we were estranged from one another, she made numerous attempts to persuade me to move back in by saying things that evoked feelings of pity on my part. It feels like you're just waiting for me to die. I don't feel any shame in admitting that I did that. I just wanted to be with my children again and put this nightmare behind us as quickly as possible. I detested her and everything that she had been responsible for. I didn't bother to file for a divorce in the first place. I was aware that she would succumb to the cancer at some point. On November 19, 2013, it was successful. She passed away hideous and slowly while still attempting to conceal all of her lies and deceit. I am happy to report that I was able to successfully raise our 2 children on my own. As you can imagine, however, I'm riddled with trust issues that will probably never be resolved. One of the cheating, none of the reasons for the split. In fact, they never even talk about any of it at all, which for a guy who likes to talk about things to resolve them is very frustrating and uncomfortable. When we split, she begged me not to tell everyone why. But she said she'd tell her family. I was fine with it, as I always viewed it as a private matter anyway. She then talks trash about me to the kids, friends, parents, in addition to the kids, teachers. I only found this out from her text messages after she died. It's not clear at all to me how honest she was with her family. However, since they never acknowledged it happened, I can only assume they either don't know at all, or they know and it's too difficult for them to talk about. I don't want to cause any pain for her family. I haven't dated since my daughter has my wife's old mobile phone, which she has refused to clear office. She likes to read old text conversations and keep contacts from back then. Unfortunately, this means she has come across the truth many times over, regardless of how thoroughly I clear the worst of the text messages. She's 16 and understands everything that happened. We have a very solid relationship and talk openly about it all. Nevertheless, she consults a therapist regularly to help heal in ways that I can't help her with. My son knows about it all, but is completely disinterested. He's 12 now and was only 4 when she died after all. As a policy, I will not lie to them, even to protect them, as I feel strongly that lies are what led us to where we're at now. I can only imagine the emotional damage if they found out as adults and from someone other than me. I've continued to bring the kids up to visit where her family lives from where we live, about an 8-hour drive for the holidays, and for an extended time during the summers. For the most part, they're good people who are kind and did nothing to deserve being cut off from their grandkids. My kids love them. And they have lots of cousins in their extended family who are the same ages as my kids. They go out of their way to make us feel welcome, and I find their company to be enjoyable. The only peculiar aspect of the whole thing is the fact that her family has never addressed any of the events that took place. None of the cheating, and none of the other issues that led to the breakup. In point of fact, they never even discuss any of it at all, which can be very frustrating and awkward for a guy who prefers to talk about issues in order to find solutions to those issues. When we broke up, she begged me not to disclose the reason to anyone else. However, she stated that she would tell her family. I had no problem with it because I had always considered it to be a personal business anyway. She then talks trash about me to the kids, friends, parents, in addition to the kids, teachers. I didn't find out about this until her text messages after she passed away. The trash she talks about me includes the children. To what extent she was truthful with her family is something that is not at all clear to me. The fact that they have never admitted that it took place, on the other hand, leads me to believe that either they are completely unaware of the situation or that they are aware but find it too difficult to discuss it. I don't want to make things more difficult for her family in any way. But if they could give me something that is rightfully mine and that they have, it would be the rings that they have, both engagement and wedding. When she passed away, her mother and her sister cleaned out her room, and I believe that one of them took the rings with them when they left. They most likely did this at her request, perhaps with the intention of presenting them to my daughter on some important occasion in the future. In spite of this, I do not consider them to have ever been hers because the extent of her cheating was so throughout the entirety of our relationship. They only stand for faithfulness, and no other person will ever find them to be as significant or symbolic of anything else as I will when I finally get rid of them for good. They only represent infidelity. When we had no money, I made sacrifices and saved so that I could buy them for her. And here I was under the impression that we were romantically involved. If only I had known the answer to the question that everyone in this group is probably wondering, which is how do you stop thinking about it at all? Even though it has been 8 years since she passed away, I still have trouble falling asleep when I go to bed at night. I simply go over the debates and discussions that we had previously. I often find myself dwelling on the ways in which I could have better handled certain situations, such as how I should have spoken up for myself sooner when warning signs first appeared. I am doing all of this fully aware that there is absolutely nothing that can be done about it at this point. In the past 8 years, I've aged for a total of 24 years. I'm 44 but I look 64. If things continue as they are, I won't be around when my kids get married and maybe even have kids of their own to give them fatherly advice. Emotionally, I want to be able to put this painful period of my life behind me, find some peace and redemption, and stop beating myself up for being so oblivious during those trying years.